Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Strengthening Your Campus Websites for Undocumented Students webinar today. Thank you so much for joining us. Now more than ever, it's such an important time to make sure that the campus, college, and university websites that we have information that's easily accessible and easily viewable for undocumented students, especially during this pandemic when so much virtual learning is going on. So we're so grateful for you to come today. Thank you for joining us. People are just jumping on as we're speaking. Thank you so much to everyone. We know that there are people coming from across California, from the CSUs, the UCs, the CCCs. We also have some individuals from private schools. There's even a couple of people across the states that are coming. I know we have individuals from New York, from Pennsylvania. So welcome to one and all. We're really excited that you're here. I'm really glad to be able to have this webinar today that is really going to highlight the guide that Immigrants Rising has recently released about strengthening your campus websites for undocumented students. Immigrants Rising is an organization that many of you know. We want to make sure that you know how to find us online as well. We have a website. We're constantly working to update and strengthen our website. We also have social media platforms, and we hope that you follow us there. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and also we've recently started to tweet a little bit more. So we hope that you check us out on Twitter at Immigrants Rise. And we're really excited to be able to share this information with you today, and we'll continue to be highlighting different pieces on the social media as we follow out through the academic year. As many of you know, Immigrants Rising is an organization that empowers undocumented young people in their college and career path. And we do that through services, resource, information, sharing stories, income generation, entrepreneurship, and really seek to make sure that we center the voices and the needs of undocumented young people in the work that we do. And you'll see right here some amazing undocumented young people who are part of our community. And you probably know some of them as you're seeing them here today. So welcome again to all of you. We're so grateful that you're here. And we know that all of you have really powerful communities that you work with in the college or campus community that you work with, or the community and nonprofit organizations that you serve undocumented students from. My name is Nancy Cheditis, and I work as the Director of Higher Education at Immigrants Rising. I've been with the organization volunteering and working as a full-time staff now close to a decade. I love the work that I do. I believe so much in the organization, and you'll see me there holding a binder full of many different resources and materials, some of which you will see throughout the presentation today. And my work really centers around helping undocumented young people get the information that they need, as well as helping colleges and universities build the practices that they need to be able to better support undocumented students and support educators in their path. And I'm really excited to be here today with my co-host, Madeline Villanueva, and she's going to introduce herself now.
Hi everyone, thank you Nancy for that. My name is Madeline Villanueva, and I am the Catalyst Fund Specialist with Immigrants Rising. So I just work with our 32 Catalyst funded campuses throughout the state, working with their educators to kind of build up and expand and strengthen their undocumented student services. When I was in college, I was an undocumented student, and so I'm really drawn to the work, and this is a community that's really close to my heart. And websites were also a great resource for me when I was a student, so I'm also really glad to be speaking with you all today about that.
Thank you, Madeline. Madeline and I are the primary guide authors of the Strengthening Campus website for undocumented students that we're going to be showing to you today. So welcome, welcome. We're glad that you're here. In terms of a little bit of an overview of what we'll be doing, Madeline and I are going to share the pieces about looking at the bigger picture in terms of like, why is it so important to have a website? How can you get buy-in from your campus, be able to get those updates needed that are necessary? Also some research that really centers why it's so important to have up-to-date, accessible websites to support undocumented students in their path for higher education. And then we'll actually break down the guide and go through the different pieces, talking about the key components that you can use to improve your website And then Madeline's going to walk us through some of the research that she did to show us examples from the field that are really exciting, live, current, up-to-date websites that you could see that maybe will give you some great ideas to model on. And then we'll just come to a next step and closing. So you can definitely put your questions in the chat. You can hit the Q&A, and we'll definitely try to answer those as we go along. In terms of what the purpose of is today in the webinar, we really want to make sure that educators have concrete recommendations, that we're providing them with concrete recommendations and tangible next steps on how to build and strengthen their campus websites, because we know that this is really key to student access and to student success. So part of the outcomes that we have for today is really recentering the need to have accessible campus websites, especially now that we've transitioned to online learning in virtual classrooms. We really also want to make sure that you are aware of some of the key elements, suggested language, and recommended resources that are available for you to strengthen your own admissions website, your financial aid website, and if you already have one, an undocumented student resources page. Those are just really important pieces that we think are vital for you to be able to know about. We also really want to engage you in strategies of how to strengthen your financial aid and admissions websites, because while we know that it's incredibly important to have an undocumented student resource page, many students, it's not the first place that they go when they're coming to campus. They look at the admissions requirements. They look to see what kind of financial aid must be available. So that's why we're so excited today that we are joined from individuals who are from the admissions department, Dream Resource Center coordinators, financial aid individuals, also administrators, right? Because we also need to really get the buy-in from administrators. We have a couple of vice presidents of student services. Again, welcome to all. And then we want to identify some next steps for you to be able to improve your own campus's online presence. And that we have a checklist where you can just go ahead and review your own website. And then we also have some tips in our guide that we'll be talking about today about how you can engage with key partners. So we're excited for what we're going to bring, and we hope that it's really enjoyable and informational for you as well. We just want to start again in terms of centering, like, why are websites so important? And as both Madeline and I have said, internet is often the first place that students look. Like, so many students might just start, X school and undocumented on Google and see what comes up. Or they go to your school and then they're poking around to try to see, like, I know I heard something about AB 540, where is that? Or what's that DREAM Act that they're talking about? So internet is definitely a key now more than ever, right? For students to be able to get the information that they need. And as we all know, there's just increasing reliance on technology and the internet. Additionally, having a really strong website can allow your school to fulfill on some of its mission to be able to increase the recruitment and the retention of the students that are in your service area. So having the information that they need makes it easier for them to apply on time, meet the deadlines, get you the information that you need. So again, more reasons why it's important to have accurate information on your websites. And also for undocumented students, this is a next level still, that having that kind of accurate information on your website allows students, undocumented students specifically, to get the information that they need without having to reveal their status. Because while there are many undocumented young people who are like, I'm undocumented, and they speak about it freely, others have been told that that's something that they should not be doing. And now with this political climate, feel that more than ever. So having websites with really key information that's accessible for students can be a really big step for equity. And it's also an important step to be able to increase the number of students that you serve who are college ready and want to attend your college or university. So websites, as we all know, are just super important. But now, more than ever, I think that virtual education is just requiring that we take a second look at what is our online presence for our college or university. Because as we know, so many students who are undocumented students used to just drop into Dream Resource Centers, financial aid offices, and admissions and records offices, or to that one stop, or to the admissions office to be able to ask their questions, and they can no longer drop in. Especially Dream Resource Centers, right? And while there are other options, like social media and Zoom and stuff, it's really not everybody knows how to find those pieces. And if we don't promote them well, it's harder still for students to find us. The other reason why virtual education is so important right now is that students who are high school seniors, who normally have so much help of their college and admissions, their high school counselors and college admissions counselors that are helping them kind of get through those next steps, or the community college transfer students who are able to talk to all the different people in their campuses, weren't able to get that kind of traditional support in spring 2020. And so many students are kind of being left out of that information circle. And while the digital divide is still real, we do think that while students do have the ability to be able to actually log on and get information, we want them to be able to find it quickly and easily. We also know that this summer there were lots of virtual orientations that took place, but many times having them be virtual reduced the students' ability to just be able to pop into somebody, like bump into somebody else, ask a question, just go from table to table and get the information that they need, or see some of the signs that might call their attention to let them know about the extra support that was available for them on campus. And meeting virtually, for those of you who, like me, are probably on Zoom a lot these days, we know that it can sometimes build a little bit of a bridge in communication. There's not that it's a little bit harder to build community online. Not impossible, but for a student who's wanting to come out, sometimes it can make it harder for students to be able to reveal their status. So for all of these reasons, we hope that all of you agree and are really committed to making sure that your online resources at your campus and university can be tip-top and available to students, especially now more than ever. We're also going to be focusing a lot today on financial aid and admissions websites. And I alluded to this a little bit before in terms of it's great to have an undocumented student page, and we have lots of good suggestions in our guide, but many students start with financial aid and admissions. And we know that paying for college is actually the biggest barrier that undocumented young people have stated gets in their way of being able to actually attend or continue attending higher education. It's also difficult to navigate requirements for that in-state tuition and state-based financial aid. For those of you who are admissions counselors, for those of you who are Dream Resource Center coordinators, have seen the affidavit, it's a complicated legalese piece of paper, which definitely needs to be filled out, but not everybody knows exactly what the steps are, right? So it's good to have good, clean information, deadlines, supportive language on your admissions website that talks about that, and state-based financial aid as well. FAFSA, FAFSA, FAFSA rolls off the tongue of many, but we're really working to make sure that anybody who's saying FAFSA also says California Dream application, and that's why it's really important that we take a look at our financial aid websites as well. Also, misinformation and lack of knowledge really reduces access. And so when students think they applied the correct way for the California Dream Act, and then they realize there's another application that they should do, or they got a FAFSA recommendation from their high school counselor, and then realize later they should be doing their Dream Act application instead. That's why it's so important to have that information front and center. And because of that confusion, there are many state and institutional grants that are left on the table due to a very complicated process. And we know that websites can provide really important guidance to clarify the process, to indicate the steps that are necessary, and to make sure that students get the answers to the questions that they have about how they're going to pay for college and how they're actually going to get admitted to the college that they're interested in attending. And so I talked a little bit about the effects of having no affidavit, but for those of you who are not really up to date on the costs or what happens with these applications, is that I have a little CCJenny. I meant to have that say CCC, CSU, and UC, and you'll see that what the costs are for resident students who meet the tuition for residency purposes, who have AB 540, SB 68, or AB 2000, the fees are dramatically reduced, right? We're looking at $600 approximately versus almost $4,000 at the CCC, $3,600 this past fall semester, or versus $8,000 if you're paying non-resident tuition, because maybe perhaps you didn't turn in your affidavit, and the UCs, it's 3 times as much, right? And that last column, super important as well. If students don't know that they have to turn in an affidavit, that they know the steps or the deadline to do that, they might end up facing those really high fees and not be able to even have eligibility for the state-based financial aid they would have that they apply for and should be receiving. So again, really centering the importance of making sure that your financial aid and your admissions are up to date and have all the information that undocumented students need and that fulfill the requirements of the law. So we know that in terms of being able to update your websites, unfortunately, we can't just like magic wand and update the websites the way that we want. There's steps and processes that we need to go through. So again, another reason I'm really glad that admissions directors, financial aid directors, vice presidents of student services, administrators, enrollment directors are on the call today because we need your support, right? We who are the front lines working with undocumented young people every day need to be able to ensure that you're able to get the buy-in that you need to update your website. So that if you can't go directly to admissions and say, hey, can you update my website? If you're able to provide information and resources to the vice president of student services or the dean of enrollment, they might be able to help you make your case. And why, some of the reasons why we know that this is really important, it's not just an equity and social justice issue. It's not just sort of like specifically just for undocumented students alone. This is an issue that really having up-to-date websites ensures access for all students, which we know is a mission for many of your colleges and universities. It's also able to really help increase student retention and recruitment. When there's not all this back and forth of affidavit, no affidavit, you didn't apply correctly for the DREAM Act, you did, there's here these other pieces, you're able to decrease processing time and make sure that students are getting the information that they need and the financial aid that they have eligibility for. And it also can really build better collaboration across departments. So some of the strategies to make that happen, as I was saying, we definitely want to identify decision makers, get them on our side, gain institutional buy-in, and really stay committed. Like this isn't going to be something that might not happen on the first try, but gaining information, showing the value of being able to do this is going to help you. And we definitely have some detailed strategies about how to do that in the guide. And we want to support you in that. So if you have any questions about how that's actually going to go down, we definitely encourage you to reach out to Madeline or myself, and our contact information is going to be included at the end of the presentation today. So I hope you're feeling super excited now about like why it's so important, where you need to be looking, and who are some of the institutional champions that you need to get on your side to be able to make sure that undocumented students have the access and information that they need. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Madeline now, and she's going to help us take a look at the bigger picture.
Okay, so I'm not on mute anymore. Okay, thank you, Nancy, for that really great overview. I think some of your points really highlight why it's so important to include undocu-specific resources on your campus website. And so right now I'm just going to be presenting on some of the larger trends that we noticed across the state that reiterate why it's so key to have information for undocumented students online and easily accessible and to navigate. So if we can go to the next slide. So this first slide is around the CCC Dreamers project. This was a collaboration with Immigrants Rising and the Foundation for California Community Colleges. But this was a research, a survey, a research, and a report that was released in the summer of 2019. And this looks at all 114 community colleges and the support services that they provide for undocumented students. It lists out the different challenges that undocumented students face in the community colleges, as well as promising practices that campuses are doing to serve, to help undocumented students meet some of these barriers. And it also provides recommendations to the chancellor's office at the community colleges on how to better serve undocumented students system-wide. And if you want to check out this report, it's available on our website, immigrantsrising.org. And the PowerPoint will have the link when we share it with you all. But one of the challenges identified in this report, and it's actually the first challenge and the one that I think is most relevant to us today, is that there is an inadequate ability to outreach to undocumented students across the CCCs. And this means that campuses don't feel like they're effectively able to reach out to students and provide them with the information and resources that they need to succeed in college. And there are many contributing factors that was described in the report around this, but one of the reasons for this inability was around there not being enough information online for undocumented students to find. So important resources that they need to know when entering college and will help them navigate college wasn't present in a lot of the websites that we surveyed. We looked at all 114 colleges, and a majority of them just were missing a lot of those really important resources for undocumented students. And so a recommendation that came out of this was to actually ask the Chancellor's Office to mandate that all campuses have at least one web page with important resources for undocumented students to help with their enrollment and retention. And as you notice here, this recommendation doesn't specify that this web page is a Dream Resource Center. I think Nancy really helped highlight the point that financial aid and admissions may be the first place that undocumented students check out to find what's available for them on your campus. So this recommendation really is just asking campuses to have at least one dedicated web page to for undocumented students to access some of those resources that's available for them. And if we go to the next slide, our higher education fellow from last year, Myra Pelagio, also did an analysis of our 32 Catalyst campuses. She looked at important elements that she identified, and she identified that were key to undocumented student access and success in college, and saw if 3 important websites, which was Financial Aid, Admissions, and Undocumented Student Resources, had these elements and they were accessible for students. And Myra first started doing this research in November of last year, and the analysis didn't go out until January of this year. And so I'm going to be sharing with you some of the findings from that survey, but I think I also want to mention that some of the websites could have changed at this point. And we really want to highlight this because the Catalyst campuses are a good representation of kind of where websites are for undocumented students at the point of time that the analysis was taken. So let's go to the next slide to look at some of the results. So the first one is around admissions and records. And again, the important elements that were looked at in these pages were around in-state tuition. So requirements for AB 540, SB 68, and the affidavit for that. As you can see in this chart, only about 20 of the 32 colleges had an affidavit listed on their website. Only 14 had the AB 540 requirements, and less than that, which was around 8 campuses, had the updated SB 68 requirements. And something that Myra also noted in her research was that even though many schools had the affidavit listed on their website, there wasn't a lot of information attached to it. So let's say an incoming student doesn't really know about in-state tuition, for example. They might not know what the affidavit is or what it's for or how important it is, and may have to dig a little bit deeper and miss that that's an important step that they need to take in order to get in-state tuition on your campus. And if we go to the next page, next slide, similar for financial aid, the important elements around this were mainly around state financial aid, which was California DREAM Act, and in-state tuition, AB 540, because as we know, in-state tuition is required, eligibility for in-state tuition is required to access state financial aid in California. And if we look at the right side of the chart, you can see that only about 15 financial aid websites at the time had AB 540 requirements listed on their site. 53% of our campuses did not. Only 20 schools had California DREAM Act information. Many only included the link to the DREAM Act website. And again, if you have an incoming student who doesn't necessarily know too much about state financial aid, they might not know what that is, why that's important, and that's the application they need to fill out in order to access financial aid in California. There was about 26 schools who did list California DREAM Act and FAFSA. And again, this is really important. So as Nancy mentioned, to present both options to students at the same time so that they know that there are different applications and there's a specific application for undocumented students in California. And if we go to the next slide. Okay, this one. So this one's around the undocumented student resources. Myra did identify a few more elements for these ones compared to the other pages, and most of them are listed for you in the chart on the right. But we did find that only about half of our campuses at the time had a contact person listed on their website. So if a student did have a specific question around an undocumented resource, they may have a harder time finding who to go to for that question, since contact information wasn't as clearly listed as it could be. We also know that legal services and information about services for that is important for undocumented students and their families. And we found that only about 6 campuses had that information listed on their site. And we also know that students are active in social media, and another way to engage with students is through social media. A few of our programs and undocumented student services do have social media presence, but only about 8 websites at the time listed that social media handle on their website. So you may have a social media platform, for example, but do your students know that it's there if it's not clearly listed on your website? And are you reaching students as well as you can? And so I think if we go to our next slide, this analysis and the CCC Dreamers project and all the different reasons that Nancy listed earlier really showed the need for campuses to have support in strengthening their campus websites for undocumented students. And that's why we ended up writing this guide just for that. If you all haven't checked it out, this is the front page for it. It's available on our website, immigrantsrising.org, and I think we also sent it out earlier this week. But if we go to the next slide, this is basically what you'll find in the guide. And the way we message the guide, it's really around building and strengthening your campus website. And so I think the 2 sections that we split the guide into, which is analyzing essential components and taking it to the next level, is reflective of that. So if you are just starting out your website, or you want to build a little bit more into it, the analyzing essential components may be a good place to get started to get some of the elements and resources for that. But if you are more established in your website and want to expand it and improve it and strengthen it, the taking it to the next level section may be a good place to start for that. And as you can see, we did split up the guide into the 3 important websites that we've been talking about, which was around admissions and records, financial aid, and undocumented student resources. And for the analyzing essential components, we have both the key elements and recommended resources part of the section. And the key elements are things that we identified that are really, really important that has to be included on your websites. And these are areas that undocumented students should know about, and it will help them kind of access and navigate your college. So for financial aid, for admissions and records, for example, this is really around in-state tuition and student data protection. And for financial aid, it's around paying for college, so things around the California DREAM Act and scholarships. And so we also included recommended resources for both of these areas. A lot of them are Immigrants Rising specific materials that you can easily just embed on your website, but we really do also encourage, if you have any campus specific resources, for example, any steps to enrollment list that you have, scholarship list that's specific to your campus, we also really recommend to include all of those in your website. And for the USR page, we have a few more key elements listed. I'll be going into that a little deeper down the line. But we also included tips for language on how to make your USR page more welcoming. Something that I forgot to bring up is for the key elements for the admissions and financial aid page, we actually included specific language around AB 540 and the California DREAM Act that you can take from the guide, like copy and paste it directly on your website. Nancy is going to be going a little bit more deeply into that, but we really want the right message and the right information to be conveyed to students around these areas. So that's why we included specific language for those different key elements. And for the taking it to the next level, we have a few of the additional elements listed on here that would be good information to also include along with the key elements. These are more like supplemental additional things that might be good for undocumented students to know. And we will be going over more of that in the specific sections too. But I'll take a pause there and we can go to the next slide and see how the actual guide looks like. And if we can click on the table of contents. Okay, so the guide itself is a live Google document. So it is easier to copy and paste specific language if needed. But if we scroll down to the table of contents, one thing I also want to mention about the guide is it does not have to be read in a specific order or really in one sitting. Let's say that you're interested in improving your financial aid website, for example. So you could just go over there, click on financial aid, and it will take you to the section. You can check out the different essential components on there, the recommended language, what resources would be great to put. And then at the end of each of the section, and then taking it to the next level, and the additional elements that will be good to embed on your website. We have a few examples. I'll be going over that later too. At the end of each section, there is a link to go back to the table of contents. So it's easy to jump back up on top again. And at the end of the guide, we do have this checklist. This checklist. And this checklist again is split in the 3 different websites. And so if you are interested in, let's say, assessing your financial aid websites, this lists all the different key elements, resources, and additional elements we recommended in the guide. You can check off what you have and also see what areas of improvement are needed for your website. And at the end of the checklist too, you can go ahead and go back to the table of contents and check out another section that you're interested in. So we go back to this slide. So I encourage folks to check that out if they have not already done so. But I think we could go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over for Nancy to dive a little bit deeper in the admissions and financial aid sections of the guide.
Thanks, Madeline. I'm excited I thought you did a great job in sharing that information, really grounding us in terms of like what's available in the guide and some of the research and like what led us to create this guide. This didn't just come out of thin air, but it really came out of looking at different admissions financial aid websites, talking to the 114 community colleges, as well as individuals from the CSUs and UCs. And that's how we've come up with this powerful guide. And I love that little part that you showed us, Madeline, where you can just like pop around and then go back to the table of contents and pop here and there. And also like, it's great that it's a Google Doc. So as we add more new information or something needs to be adjusted, then you don't have to reprint the guide. It's available, like Madeline said, for you to just cut and paste and move as we go. So I'm going to be just going a little bit over some of the key elements with the admissions and financial aid. Then Madeline's going to catch us up, giving a little bit of a deeper dive into the undocumented student resources. But as you'll see, we have the definition of AB 540, the eligibility requirements. These are very specific in terms of for state-based financial aid through SB 68. We talk about some of the benefits, right? Because oftentimes on the financial aid, on the admissions page, they might say the affidavit, but it doesn't actually say that if you do this, you'll be able to pay resident fees and apply for state-based financial aid or participate in EOP or EOP&S, you know, get the application admissions fee waiver at the CSUs or the UCs. So we have some great ideas of benefits and then also what the process is. So these are just important components, and we think each of these are vital for everybody's admissions page. Another part that we think is really important within the admissions page, as well as through other areas of your website, is student data protection. You know, as student data protection, you'll see on the top on that definition, insert college name. Well, this college will not release any personal identifiable information, including any data related to immigration status without a judicial warrant, you know, subpoena, ... You know, also eligibility. This means the eligibility and student data protection go hand in hand, saying that the CSUs, the CCCs, and the UCs are open to all students who meet the minimum requirements for admission, regardless of immigration status. I mean, there's residency and there's non-residency, and there might be different admissions requirements, but individuals who are, or international students, but for individuals who are meeting the eligibility for AB 540, we want them to know, or that are applying to your school, that all are welcome, right? And then it also talks about the benefits. You can be confident that there are federal and state laws, as well as what some of the process is, right? What's the directory information that you have? Do you, as educators, even know what the directory information is that your school shares? But I think the most important part is that part we have in quotes, will not release any personal identifiable information unless required by law. And I think many students are really scared in this political climate right now. Is it safe to apply to college? Is it safe to apply to the California Dream application? Is it safe to go ahead and give my income verification documents if necessary, right? So letting people know about student data protection is key. Some of the resources that we have that are recommended, you'll see there's a couple that we have listed up here, like definitely making sure, as we talked about, the up-to-date affidavit, making sure that now the checking to see that that affidavit that you have is an affidavit that's fillable online, right? So that, because many students don't have a printer at home to be able to print it out, fill it out, scan it, send it back, right? So if you have a printable affidavit, a fillable affidavit, that's going to make it a lot easier for students to get the information to us that colleges and universities need. We also created a submitting the affidavit FAQ, because while that's not the same at every school, there are some basic procedures that we want students to know. And like, if you have a deadline that your affidavit needs to be submitted by, please make sure that that's listed on your website. Also, as Madeline was talking about, campus-specific resources are super important. We are going to be recommending a lot of the resources that Immigrants Rising has created, but we know that if you have steps for enrolling or scholarship information, or like information about the Undocumented ally list that you have, those kinds of who is the person and contact information that you have for your school, these are vital resources to also make sure that are on your admissions page. And if we're thinking about taking to the next level, Immigrants Rising has created a California in-state tuition qualifier tool, which helps students helps them determine whether they have met the attendance and degree requirements to apply. Now, this tool does not tell students if they meet the eligibility, but it does help them do some of the math. We also suggest that you include information for mixed status households. There's thousands of individuals in California and across the nation who are part of mixed status family households, meaning someone might be a citizen and someone might be undocumented. And so having that information about how do you apply for in-state tuition and state-based financial aid is really key. Also, another part that we think is really important is helping people identify and remember what's the difference between in-state tuition, the DREAM Act, and DACA. Because once DACA came onto the scene, it seemed to be like everything was DACA, right? But knowing and helping students remember that regardless of whether you have DACA or not, has nothing to do with whether you can apply for in-state tuition or state-based financial aid. And then another area that I think is really important is having a specific tab or page for AB 540 students or undocumented students, either on your financial aid or on your admissions page. And if you don't want to create, and also like how can you cross-link some of those tabs, right? But for some students, when you're looking for information, you might find the residency, the non-resident tuition exemption form or the AB 540 affidavit, but it's listed under forms and people don't know always how to get there right away. So having a specific tab can make it a lot easier for students to navigate the way that they need to. So that's kind of talking about admissions. We now just, that's like a quick overview. We have so much great detailed information in our guide. So we definitely encourage you to look at that. And as Madeline was saying, cutting and pasting that information is really going to be key to help you get the support that you need to spiffy up your website in a jiffy. So the other thing that we want to talk about, that I'm going to be talking about, is also financial aid, the financial aid webpage. So I was a financial aid counselor for about 8 or 9 years at San Francisco State University. And while we were there, we actually were able to create a page for undocumented students when the California DREAM Act came through. And so we think that it's really important to have information exactly about what is the California DREAM Act application. And that, as I was saying before, making sure that if there is financial aid information for FAFSA, and there's a little blurb and kinds of information that go with it, that is equitably represented on the website for the California DREAM Act. And a definition of that, like what the eligibility requirements are, in terms of income guidelines, GPA stuff, you know, program requirements that might be determined by the institution. And then what are some of the benefits, right? You know, getting the Cal grant, getting the state grant, having UC grants, the California Promise grants, participating in programs or certain scholarships that are available, and then talking about what some of the process is. So we identified some of those, one of those key elements as the California DREAM Act. And we also think that it's just so important that on your website, actually within the financial aid page, we know that AB 540 is handled elsewhere, right? It's handled at the admissions for the CSUs and the CCCs, but then it's handled at the registrar for the UCs. But does it say somewhere on that registrar, excuse me, on the financial aid page, or do you link to those pages to say clearly on there that students must be classified as meeting the eligibility for AB 540 in order to be able to receive funds from the California DREAM Act? Because too many students apply, they're kind of like a parallel track. They're working on their affidavit, they're working on their California DREAM Act application, or they're doing one without the other and they don't know. We need to help students know that those two need to ultimately be linked, right? Because students can have financial aid and it'll never release. And some schools actually don't even show their financial aid until the affidavit has been processed by the school. So please check that out on your website, because AB 540 plus the California DREAM Act is what's required to be able to get that financial aid money and reduce tuition for undocumented students at California public colleges and universities. Another key element that's super important is scholarships, right? Scholarships are the way that individuals are able to apply, especially students that don't meet AB 540 eligibility and can't get the California DREAM Act. Scholarships and self-pay are the only ways that they probably have to go to be able to meet the costs of the tuition at your school. So making sure that individuals know that there are scholarships regardless of citizenship status. There's some at almost every school. Immigrants Rising has created a great list about that. The criteria can vary, but the common denominator is that social security numbers and proof of citizenship or legal residency are not required. Many schools now have taken away the social security number as part of the admissions application, as part of the scholarship application, and instead are just asking for a student ID so that it's not another barrier that students face. And then what is the process to actually apply for a scholarship? So these areas are really important. So two key elements for financial aid: making sure that the California DREAM Act application is there, and scholarships. And then in terms of what some of the recommended resources are, we've created a great chart, which is FAFSA versus DREAM Act, making sure that students apply for the proper application. And if students do meet, fill out the wrong application, there's also instructions on there on how to pull out the wrong application and put in the right application. We have checklists for the California DREAM Act and for the Cal Grant, because unfortunately, many Cal Grants are left on the table because the GPA doesn't come in, or there's some other steps that students don't know, making sure that they know to go to the web grants for students. Checking out scholarship lists. Immigrants Rising has a great undergraduate and graduate scholarship list. It's over 50 pages for each of those. But we also know that that those scholarships need to be promoted within your school, right? So we're doing a lot of that work, and some of these resources that we have allow you to not have to be the expert and constantly updating this, but just linking to our resources and letting us do some of that research and updating to make sure that the information's up to date and your students have the information that you need. Also super important to make sure, as I was talking about campus-specific resources, if you've developed any steps for enrolling for the California DREAM Act application, right? Or like steps that now that you've applied for the California DREAM Act, this is what you need to do. And scholarship lists like that you specifically have identified at our college, these are the scholarships that are like school specific that do not require proof of citizenship. Those would also be great to add. And then if you've already got some of those pieces down and you're ready to take it to the next level, one of the major areas that we see for undocumented males between the ages of 18 and 25 not getting their state-based financial aid as they should is that there's a lack of a social selective service registration on file at the school. Now it's a different way to do that. You know, they have to mail in the form. Like, do you have a link where you can actually get that form from the CSAC website that they could print out? Letting them know the steps of that is really important. Also, verifying income is another main reason that a lot of undocumented young people kind of stop in their tracks. Or like, my parents don't file taxes, or they're not required to file taxes, or what do I do if XYZ? This is a great document that talks specifically about verifying your income for the California DREAM application. And then if you're actually trying to build a scholarship culture on your campus, then applying for scholarships is an all-in-one resource that helps students apply for scholarships by having a scholarship search chart. It's got a building your scholarship essay chart. It also has the Immigrants Rising charts, lists that I talked about, as well as 5 or 6 other databases that list scholarships that do not require proof of citizenship. And again, here on the financial aid page, we also think that it's really important to create a tab specifically for undocumented students. And when I was at San Francisco State, prior to us even opening up a California DREAM Act, prior to us opening up a DREAM Resource Center, we did make sure that when you went to our financial aid page, there was a link for AB 540 students in the California DREAM Act, and that helped so many students navigate when they called and had questions. So that's my piece. I'm going to pass it back to my colleague, Madeline, and she's going to talk a little bit about undocumented student resources. And please feel free to continue throwing any questions you have in the chat. And we look forward to hearing from you today.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy, for that really great overview of the admissions and financial aid sections of our guide. I think those are really important, like first touch points for undocumented students to check out when they're searching for what is available for them on their campus. And so right now I'm going to go on to the last section of our guide, which is around undocumented students resources pages. And you can see that we didn't call this section DREAM Resource Center. We were really intentional with making sure that this is just reflective. This includes all campuses, and it is not just limited to those who have DREAM Resource Centers, because I think it is still important and valid to just have undocumented student resources gathered in one page in your campus website, and you don't have to necessarily wait until you have that DREAM Resource Center on your campus to have a site specific for undocumented students. So if we go to the next page, next slide. So the next slide looks at all the different key elements for the undocumented students resources page. As you can tell, we have a few more elements listed here compared to the admissions and financial aid web pages. And this is because we had also intended the undocumented students resources page to really be like a one-stop shop for undocumented students. So when they land on this page, they'll find all the information that they really need to know what is available for them in your college. So this could range from the different services your campus offers. This could be information about your DREAM Resource Center if you do have one, or if you have a specific counselor in a certain department that works directly with undocumented students. This would be listed here. Since we did hear and know that financial concerns are the biggest barriers for undocumented students in going to school and continuing to stay in school. We recommend also including information and resources on how to pay for college, so including information for the California DREAM Act and in-state tuition is really important here. And if your program or your campus does host specific undocumented student events, if there's a club or you all are very active on social media, we also encourage you all to include that on here so that students can find different ways to engage with you physically and also virtually if available. Or if you have any like community partnerships with legal services providers or other community organizations that provide to your undocumented students, we also really encourage you all to list all of those on this webpage as well. And something I do want to point out is you may be wondering like why we also recommend having information to pay for college on this page, because we did already include that in financial aid and admissions and records. But again, we want to make sure that that really important information is present in multiple places, because you never know what page undocumented students are going to land in. And so it's really important to also include it here. A suggestion we do have, if you don't want to have like duplicative language throughout 3 different sites, you can link to a page on admissions, for example, or financial aid that has this information so that students still find the information on your undocumented student resource webpage. Even though it links them to another site. So that could help with maybe keeping things updated. You only have to update it in one spot. Cross-linking between sites are a really a really good strategy to make sure that that information is still in different web pages and that it's accurate throughout all of them. And if we go to the next page, next slide. We did something that I did mention before is that the USR section of our guide doesn't include a copy and paste language like the financial aid and A&R sections do. And this is really because we kind of we know that you all know your students and your campus the best, and how you want to message and reach out to the students is different across the state and even across the country. And so we really put this to you to kind of craft that messaging and that language that would be most appealing to your student, that would be most appropriate to your campus population. But we do include some recommended language tips on this part of the guide to kind of help you in making your messaging for your USR page. So a few of those are listed on this slide here, but the first one is really around just using inclusive terms. Undocumented students identify by many different terms. I think that tends to change with where you are in California, for example. And so really being mindful of that and using the different terms like Dreamer, AB 540, DACA, and Undocumented as you see fit, because you know your students the most, and having that be reflected on your undocumented student resources page. It's also good to recognize the undocumented student diversity on your page, because we know that undocumented students come from all over, and making sure that this is a good way to also outreach to different undocumented students, right? To have that diversity reflected on your page. And that could be either by using images of students from different backgrounds, for example, or like highlighting stories that show like different intersectionalities within the undocumented community. And speaking of diversity, we also all know that not all undocumented students qualify for DACA, so making sure that our messaging on this specific page is also reflective of that. So having a simple message like all undocumented people are welcome here, whether without DACA, for example, can really outreach to non-DACA students on your campus or potential students who may be unsure, like, is this service for me? Like, this lets them know that this is a space for them as well. And just the last one is really to make sure to elevate welcoming and inspiring messages or images on your website. I think it's constantly been a hard time for undocumented students. And so having inspirational messages like the one listed on here can really build up like the community space and the safe space that your campus is trying to convey. And seeing something like this on a website can also inspire a student and see that this campus could be the one for them because there is support and because there is this sense of welcoming for them there too. And if we go to the next slide, we can take a look at the what elements we included into the taking it to the next level. And there's more listed on the guide, but here's four that we pulled out for you today. The first one is around making sure that students, if you do have a bunch of other people in your school who from other departments who support undocumented students, letting students know that by publishing an UndocuAlly list on your website is really important, so they know who else to go to in different departments, for example. Legal services and mental health services are also really important resources for undocumented students, especially in this political and social climate that we're on today. So making sure that those resources are accessible and available in your web pages in this specific web page is important as well. If your campus is not providing any of these right now, or do you have any community partners that you could list on your website so students still know that resource is available for them? Or do you have any community organizations nearby who are vetted, who you know are able to take undocumented students? Is that something that you can also list on your website so students know who to seek support out to? And the last one is just around entrepreneurship information. I think with DACA being an uncertainty and it being not available to all undocumented students, it's also good to promote an alternative to that. So again, if your campus does have any like entrepreneurship and income generation opportunities, I think it's important to also have that on your webpage so students know that that is something available to them. We at Immigrants Rising do have a few entrepreneurship like videos and resources that you can link out to. But again, is there a campus department on your college or like a local organization that provides this for students that you can also refer students out to and include information on your website? And I think that's, yeah. So we can go on to the next slide. But something I do want to highlight too, and this is for all the websites, this isn't just for the undocumented student resources page, is to include keywords when you're building these websites. So again, most students find the information or find the web pages just by doing a quick search. This could be either on Google or your specific college or university search bar. They might like search undocumented and see what comes up, and that's how they find the information that's relevant for them. So making sure that when you're building these websites or talking to the person who's in charge of your websites, that keywords like undocumented student, Dreamer, AB 540, and California Dream Act are attached to your web pages so students are able to easily access them, right? So that the information may be out there, but how are students able to get to those pages when they search them? And I think something that I also really want to highlight before we move on to the next section is that the undocumented student resource page is a really good page for students to check out all the different information. But again, it's also important to have strong financial aid and admissions websites because students might not necessarily know there's a specific page for them on your campus site. And so making sure that while your undocumented student resource page is strong, that your other ones are equally as strong, and all the information that undocumented students may need is also available on those two other sites. So if we go to the next slide, we can look at a few example websites that we listed for you in the guide. This again was pulled at a certain date, so websites may change. But these are the ones that I kind of looked into and really found encompass like a lot, if not all of the key elements and additional elements and recommended resources that we listed in the guide. And we tried to be representative of all of the California public colleges and university system. So we do have examples from the CCCs, the CSU, and the UCs in the guide. But I'll go over 3 examples for you in the next few slides. So if we can go to the next slide. So for admissions, we did pick Santa Rosa Junior College's AB 540 page as a good example of how an admissions page for undocumented students can look like. This is a page that is in their admissions and records page. This is a specific page for undocumented students. And again, as you can see, this covers the key element of AB 540 that we listed. It has a definition of what is AB 540, who is eligible for it, and what can students get from it, as well as the process to how to get AB 540, including having a very clear link of that affidavit and what do you do with that affidavit. This page also has a few additional elements that we listed in the guide, which includes like an FAQ. So if students have additional questions about AB 540, they can find that. There's some language on there about student data protection. And there's also links to financial aid and the scholarships page. So that link between AB 540 and financial aid is a little bit clearer for students. And there's also this really nice diverse image to show that undocumented students come from all over. And you can check out that page in this link to see how some of those elements look like directly on this page. And if we go to the next slide, we also featured Cal Poly Pomona's financial aid page. This is this again just on their main financial aid page. There is language around the California DREAM Act alongside FAFSA, so people know that there are 2 options for financial aid applications available on their campus. They do have a specific tab for undocumented students called DREAM Act students. And this again covers that key element we talked about, which was the California DREAM Act. And it lists as a definition, eligibility, and process and benefits for that. And if you scroll down on the page, you'll find a few of our additional elements that we listed, including information about selective service and income verification. And if we go to the next slide, this one profiles like 2 undocumented student resources page. And this is for California community colleges, and we were specific again with including colleges that had a DREAM Resource Center and one that did not. So the first one up on top is from College of the Desert, and they do have a Dreamer Resource Center, and they have a great page that gives you information on how to contact their center and their staff. It even has information right now on how to engage with them virtually. They have a really great scholarship page that lists out campus-specific scholarship deadlines and even community deadlines and scholarship lists, and they even link to their financial aid page for information about the California DREAM Act and AB 540. And they have a great legal resources page that lists community partners that their students can check out if they're looking for legal resources. And Las Positas College, which does not currently have a DREAM Resource Center, they have a specific undocumented student page called Dreamers at LPC that has relevant information. So students can find out who is a good person to reach out to for support by checking out their Undocu Ally list. They have good information about AB 540 and the California DREAM Act on this page. And they try to build that welcoming environment by including like a list of institutional statements of support. So students do know that there are, that this school is supportive and welcoming of them. And I think that is my last slide for this one. I will pass it back to Nancy to kind of take any questions and move us into our closing and next steps.
Thank you so much, Madeline. That was a great overview of undocumented student pages. I think it's really important to all the different elements that you named, and the ability for us to be able to provide not just community resources, but campus resources as well. And then what's available through the state. So all of those are coming together. We're really excited in terms of talking about next steps. We know that it's not going to be easy to, just like we said, wave that magic wand, but we definitely want to encourage you to share this guide and use the Immigrants Rising website checklist. When Madeline showed you how you can just go right onto the table of contents, and with that table of contents, then just click right to the checklist, and you don't have to get started with all three at the same time, you know, but maybe if you have an undocumented student task force on your campus, could you parse it out, right? How can you build some institutional champions? When you actually take a look at the results, it's a lot easier than to go back to your admissions page, your admissions coordinator, your financial aid coordinators, the individuals who are in charge of the undocumented student page, and say, we took this result, you know, we took this checklist which came from some research on a statewide level, and this is why we think that it'd be really important to add these elements. And then identify a champion on your campus and try to get buy-in from as many different departments as you can. If it's different than if, like, you're a student services professional and then you're trying to tell the director of a department, like, I think this needs to happen, but if you're able to get the vice president of student services, or you're able to get the director on your side, or you're able to get the associate director, and then you start to build your case, it's a lot easier to get a champion who can help you get buy-in from different departments and make the work a lot easier to move forward. And definitely reach out to us for support, right? We are here. We've done a lot of research and information in terms of developing this guide, doing some of the research with the CCC Dreamers Project. We're here to support you, both Madeline and I. And we really just encourage you, especially now than more than ever, to make a commitment to changing the online presence at your school, to make sure that during this time when we have virtual learning, when individuals are often, like, computers are the easiest way for them to get information now, when it's hard to get people on the phone, make a commitment to increase the online presence at your school and increase the pathways for undocumented young people to be able to access their college and career path. So this is our contact information. My email is nancy@immigrants-rising. Madeline's is madeline@immigrantsrising.org. Madeline, why don't you just jump back on so you can just, any last words that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'm really excited for folks to kind of take this guide. I really hope people start with that checklist and see, like, where their websites are at, where their specific web pages are at, and see, like, what are you all doing great at, and what could use, like, you could use a little bit more improvement. So I'm really excited to hear how people are using this guide too, and to see just websites grow, especially at a time when we're so dependent on websites right now.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody. We super appreciate you. Reach out to us if you have questions. Check us out on social media, and we'll be talking to all of you soon. Hope you have a great day. Thanks so much.